Hi, Peter Charles here, Hooked for Life Fly Fishing, and welcome to my video on the basics of dry fly fishing. We consider dry fly fishing to be the epitome of fly fishing, and I think every angler out there, every fly fisher out there just adores dry fly fishing and just looks forward to those moments when there's a hatch coming off and we can catch trout on a dry fly. So in this video, we're going to get into the basics. We're not going to get into too much detail. We're going to keep it straightforward. And we'll take a look at what it takes to be successful in dry fly fishing. So let's get going and take a look at the next segment. Okay, let's take a look at the tackle we're going to use. Dry fly fishing is primarily a short range style of fishing. It's a delicate style of fishing, so we don't need big power sticks. We are not going to be casting very far at all. Accuracy is what's important, and delicacy. We want to drift that dry fly out, let it float down under the water, and we want it to land where we want it to land. And so the type of tackle we get is oriented towards that. So let's take a look at what I have to use here. Let's start with the flies themselves. Okay, we're looking at a series of caddis flies and mayflies here. These are caddis dries. These are mayflies here. And those are the two species that you're going to mostly concentrate on. There are other species like chironomids and crane flies and stoneflies and all that kind of stuff. But really, mayflies and caddis flies are really our most common bugs on most rivers. You might have a hatch in some places that is more common, but you know, if you know your local river, let's say for example it's a stonefly hatch on your local river, yeah, it pays to know how to fish that. But reality is caddis flies, mayflies, and that's what I have represented here. And as you can see, they're quite small, and they're also very bushy. So these flies are designed to ride on the surface of the water. Now, they don't really float, okay? You have to put floating on them to keep them up. If they get soaking wet, they will sink. But they're designed to ride on the top, and that spiky hackle you saw on those flies is designed to help them sit on the surface. It also imitates the legs of the insect as well. So what we're doing is we're trying to cast out a fly and have it land softly on the water and stay on top, and then drift down naturally. So these flies are designed to do that with their hackling and the way they're constructed, plus whatever floatant we put on them. The hooks are light wire, so they won't drag the fly down. Now, to cast those flies, we want a line that is delicate. So like this Airflow Elite line, it has a relatively long front taper. It has a very fine tip. And is designed to turn over very, very delicately, very, very smoothly. Now, as far as the rods are concerned, pretty well anything from, say, a 7-foot rod all the way up to a 9-foot rod will do the job. But the shorter the rod, the more accurate you'll be. So if you're out there with a 9-foot rod, yes, you can most definitely fish dries on a 9-foot rod, but you're going to be less accurate than if you were using a 7-foot rod. In considering the casting distances that you're doing with the dry fly rod, you know, do you really need much more than a 7.5, 8-foot rod? And the reality is you can get by very, very easily with, say, an 8-foot 4-weight. They'll do a lovely job. This rod is a NRX Plus 8.5-foot 4-weight. This is my primary dry fly rod. But I will use it for a few other things, so I've gone for 8.5 foot. But you know, if you went for 7.5 foot 4-weight, no problem. If you're just going to fish dries with it, you'll have a lovely time. It'll be very accurate. My bamboo 4-weight is 7 foot long, very, very accurate rod. So keep that in mind. The shorter the rod, the more accurate you'll be, but the less versatile the rod will be. So you have to have that trade-off when you're buying a rod. Now, as far as the reel is concerned, you don't require anything fancy in a reel. A simple click and pull reel like this one will do the job, or a reel with a simple drag. You're not fishing to, you know, huge salmon that are going to be going on these ripping runs. You're fishing to resident trout, which are typically going to be 8 to 18 inches in most cases, and they're not going to rip off your backing. So yes, you just need a basic reel that'll handle a 4-weight line, and that's it. So
keep that in mind. Shorter the rod, the better. You want a long tapered line that with a thin tip that is very delicate, and you want just a straightforward reel, and that's it. You can go fishing for dry flies.
Okay, in this segment, we're going to look at some stock footage I have of me dry fly fishing. Now, you'll notice there will not be any fish caught in this segment because we're concentrating on what I'm doing, not on the actual showing off of, oh, I got a fish. It's about the actual technique I'm using. So let's get going and have a look at some of these segments. When we see a rising fish, what does it mean? It means that we're seeing a telltale ring, that when the fish comes up and takes the insect, it creates this little ring on the water that tells us the trout has taken the fly. And that's what fly fishers are looking for when we fish dry flies, because it's pointless to fish it dry if you're not seeing rising fish. So keep a lookout for that ring.
Okay, well, what happens when an insect goes over a trout? How do they actually take it, and what does that mean for us when we're trying to catch that fish? So I've got a fly in my hand here. We'll imagine this is a natural. It comes floating along, dead drifting with the current. The trout sees it and tilts backwards, comes up and grabs the fly. Now, he's way back here, and then the trout will just go back behind his rock again. So, if you see that rise over here and aim for that spot, look how far behind the trout you are. You're over here and the trout is here. Really, you have to be aiming around here in front of the trout, so the trout has a chance to see the fly. So there's a cone of view that the trout has behind the rock. So you want to basically be a little bit in front of that cone, and then as that fly goes by, the trout picks it up, goes back and eats it. So the thing that you have to understand is don't aim where you saw the ring from the rise. Aim a few feet above that spot and let the fly drift through. That's called the trout's window. And the trout is looking up, seeing the world through that window, and that fly drifts over the window, it'll go up and take it. If it's too far to the right or too far to the left, the trout will ignore it. This little fly doesn't have enough calories in it to make it worthwhile for the trout to chase all over the place for it. So it's going to spend the minimum amount of energy to grab this. And as I say, if it's too far one way or the other, it's not going to take it. So ideally, what's going to happen is you're going to see your fly drift through where you saw that ring, but you have to cast it 3 or 4 feet upstream of where you saw it. The other thing that I might add is something called timing. When we're watching fish rise, if there is a constant hatch going on, you'll see a fish come up, glump, takes a natural, goes down. If another one drifts over immediately afterwards, the fish doesn't take it. It'll sit on the bottom, and then it'll come up and take another one. And how much time elapses depends on the rapidity of the hatch, the density of the hatch, the individual fish. But each one is not going to go glump, glump, glump. It's going to go up, take a fly, go down, and then maybe 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 20 seconds later, come up and take another one. So you sometimes when there's a steady hatch going on and you see a nice big fish, take your time, watch, and see if you can get some sense of the timing of the fish, if it's coming up every 10 or 15, 20 seconds. And then, so when you see a rise, don't immediately whack your fly right over there. Give it a bit of time and then put your fly in, and you have a much better chance of getting that fish. So remember, don't aim at the ring, aim upstream of the ring, and give it enough space that it gives a chance for the fish to pick up the drift, see the fly go over its head, and then go back and take it.
Now when we dry fly fishing, we can in reality cast at any angle that we like. I could cast directly downstream as an example, or cross-stream. There's multiple choices, but the most common and probably the most effective method is to cast upstream at an angle. So in other words, we're casting behind the fish, we're coming up from behind the fish so that the fish can't see us. Remember that dry fly fishing is a relatively short-range technique. So if we are fishing in front of the fish, they can see us more easily than from behind. Secondly, we want to cast at a bit of an angle, as you see as I'm doing here. I'm not casting directly into that seam. I'm casting probably about a 30-degree angle. And the reason for that is when I cast ahead of the fish to put my fly above the fish, my fly line doesn't go across its head, only the leader. And that is the reason why. And the other thing you'll want to notice here is that my drifts are relatively short. I am not casting and drifting a long way. I want those drifts to be quite short because, if the fish doesn't take the fly after it's gone through its window, there's no point continuing to drift further down. You're just going to spook other fish when you lift your line off. So you pull your line off quickly and get the fly back over the trout's window. And if the trout doesn't take a fish, well, that's dry fly fishing. Sometimes you have to change your fly, sometimes you have to change your presentation, and sometimes you just have to go pick another fish.
Now, the last thing I want to talk about is something called matching the hatch. And really, that's a subject for another video. Essentially, all it means is we pick the fly that most closely resembles the size and the color of the insect that is coming off. And really, the order in that is size, color, and overall shape. So in other words, I wouldn't put a caddis fly in a mayfly hatch just because it was the right size and color. You might get some fish, but you'd be better off with a mayfly. So you would choose, if you're imitating sulfurs that were size 14, so you pick a size 14 sulfur imitation and a mayfly, and go for it, hope for the best. But we have to match the hatch. But as I say, that's more of a subject for another video.
Okay, that gives you a good idea what dry fly fishing is all about. It is an awful lot of fun, and the first time you have a fish take your dry fly, it's going to be a feeling you'll never forget. So that gives you the idea of the basics of dry fly fishing. It should be enough to get you started. There is a lot more material out there, there's a lot more to learn, but this is a good start. So get out there and start fishing dries. Cheers.